the source comes from Harvard. There was some research done, and even the research itself says LLMs mimic human cognitive dissonance. Now, I'll explain what that is if you are not familiar, but all of a sudden, out of this is a whole slew of things saying, oh, well, see, this is evidence that AI has reached sentience. This is proof that AI does think and act exactly like human beings. Oh, this, that. And it's like, stop. Read the research first. The research itself is very open about the fact it does not think. The research is not confirming that this is now sentient. The research is not confirming this is the same as human cognitive dissonance. Literally, it talks openly about the fact it mimics it, which, like I say all the time, it is trained on massive amounts of human data. And one of the biggest threats that I keep calling out is the fact it is very good at pretending to look, sound, and feel like human beings. That's part of the reason we're so vulnerable to it, because we're like, I'm pretty sure it is real. I'm pretty sure it is a human. No, it's not. But it's really good at pretending it is, and it's going to just keep getting better at it. And so when stuff like this comes out, it's further evidence that it's like, yeah, it is really good at mimicking us. Now, this research that I'll break down is also something we need to take into consideration when we think about how we use AI, because cognitive dissonance, which, if you're not familiar, in layman's terms, is just the more you're around something, the more you start to think a certain way. And the more you start to think a certain way, the more whatever you see starts to confirm and reinforce what you already think, and isn't actually, you're losing your objectivity. That's it, right? That's cognitive dissonance in, how I would explain it to my children. So what does that mean that LLMs are starting to display more cognitive dissonance? And I'm going to break this down based on how it actually affects in day-to-day stuff, because there are ways you can mitigate this. And it's not necessarily, oh, this is the end of the world. And I've already seen things like this proves ChatGPT 04, because it was run on GPT 4.0. This proves 4.0 is getting worse and more biased because it's yes and no in all these things. So really, the way they ran the research experiment was they asked it to they gave it prompts to write a very persuasive essay about a controversial figure, Vladimir Putin. Okay. They asked it to write an essay. And as you can imagine, right, it has all this data on it, and you would ask it to do it, and you would ask it to give an output. And what they found was, over time, based on the way it was prompted to do it, it started to think more like the way it was prompted. It became more biased towards the way it was prompted. Now, this is where it gets dangerous in terms of how people are interpreting it, because what people then logically conclude is, so then that means 4.0, the actual OpenAI model, is now becoming more conditioned to think this way, which that would be catastrophic, by the way. A good example of that is the old Twitter bot debacle, where they put a Twitter bot out there and they let it be reinforced by the input it was getting. And within minute, I mean, it was like nothing. The thing was just a rage spewing hate machine. I mean, it was just toxic within not very long. So I understand why people freak out and they go, wait a minute, this research is showing that the more inputs it gets, the more cognitive dissonance it demonstrates. Well, what are all the people using AI for? And isn't this going to make the AI model more biased towards whatever it's? Okay, slow down. Don't start. And this is where you can start watering these seeds and you can go off the chain. But what it showed was, if you had a conversation with OpenAI's 4.0, you asked it to write some very persuasive essays, pro-Putin, anti-Putin, whichever way you want to go with it, whatever you conditioned and prompted it towards would then become more of that. And all future things, because that was the test, is like, okay, now let's just ask it to do it on its own and see what it does. And then compare that. And sure enough, it was more biased towards the way it had been conditioned. That's what the research found. Okay. So you can see, is it becoming, is it sentient? No, it's just becoming more familiar with your patterns within a conversation. And so I've told everybody this many times. AI is trained to give you what you want. You are its end user. If it thinks you want to know just more of this stuff, and yes, it's supposed to be objective, but it knows really this is what you want. It's just going to get better at giving you the responses you want to hear. And this is where the risk is. You can absolutely build your own AI echo chamber where you go, no, it's objective. It's objective, and look at what it's saying. And it's like, well, actually, no, because it's just learned from you, and it learned this is how you feel. And it's subtly just reinforcing what you want to hear. That has big implications, especially given the fact people already think, oh, AI is smarter than all the PhDs in the world, and it's more capable than this. So now that echo chamber is just going to get continually reinforced. Now, before I get into some of the risks, I want to talk about how this actually breaks down, because this is what's getting misinterpreted all over the place. Okay, so this is demonstrated within a single conversation thread. So by default, if you're having a single conversation, if you opened a chat window in a new conversation and you're staying in that conversation, this is where the cognitive dissonance will show up. So if you use one of these big models and you just have a open conversation, you just it's like your garbage dump. You just dump everything into it. Just know that conversation is becoming more biased towards whatever you're talking to it about. Just is. Now, does it mean it's carrying over into other conversations within your local instance? It depends. It depends. With ChatGPT and some of the other models, many of the other models, it has shared memory. Okay, it has memory. It's not real memory, but it's sharing information across your instance. If that's turned on, which you can turn off, at least on some of the models, then no, it doesn't. Then each time you open a new conversation thread, if shared memory is turned off, you're not dealing with the same thing. If shared memory is turned on, just know your whole instance is going to become more cognitively biased towards what you want. Now, what wasn't tested that I would be very interested to hear, although I have my suspicions on how it would play out, is I didn't see anything in the research that actually broke down what happens if you actually tell it to acknowledge its own cognitive dissonance and bias, and you want it to go back and thoroughly analyze and objectively reassess. I have done that at times, and I found it does a decent job of self-checking itself if prompted. It's not going to do it on its own. It's not going to go, you know what? I wonder if I'm becoming a little more biased. Maybe I should sit back and really reflect on how all these conversations I'm having with Christopher is influencing me, because it's not conscious. So it's not going to do that on its own. What I found is if I'm truly looking for an objective perspective from it, I can prompt it to reset and remove any biases that I've input into it and start from scratch. I have found it's relatively good, but I don't have research to confirm that that actually works. Okay, but I've seen it enough to see it'll change and it'll reanalyze and it'll spit back something. And sometimes I'm like, whoa, didn't see that one coming, type of a thing. But if you have shared memory turn on, just know all your conversations are being influenced by the cognitive dissonance that you're experiencing. Now, what it isn't doing, and this is the part I want to be really, really clear on, is that it's not going now back into GPT-4o at OpenAI and retraining the entire model on this. And that's some of the stuff I'm seeing coming out of this that I'm like, oh, come on, stop. You're going to make people think that this is how AI works, and it doesn't. What you type in AI, as much as they go, and I want to explain this, as much as they say, hey, can we use your stuff for training data? It's not like whatever conversations you're having are inherently being sucked back into the machine and it's updating in real time with what you're saying. And that's honestly one of the biggest misunderstandings I see with people all the time, is they think that like the models themselves are being trained with your conversations like on the fly. They're not. What they're saying is, can we capture all this data so that when we do another closed training exercise, we can include that data because then we can see how people used it. What have they talked about? What are the inputs? What kind of responses did they like? Did they not like? Can we retrain it? But you've got to remember the models themselves, at least the majority of them, they're not updating in real time, right? It's a closed instance. They train a model. It's built to a certain level. That's why there's release dates. It's because they do a closed training. They sign it off. They pressure test it. They do all this. Once they get it all finalized, they go, okay, now we put this out into the wild. Now, it's doing all this stuff in your individual conversations and conversations all over the place, but you're not affecting the training data in and of itself. Anything you're contributing to the training data could potentially be used in a future update. Now, when those will happen, how fast they release, like whether your data itself will be included, like that's yet to be seen, because all that the data has to be cleaned. It has to be all this other stuff. But I want to be clear on that because I've already seen stuff where people are like, did you know that 4.0 is actually becoming more biased because of how people are using it? And I'm like, no, it's not. No, it's not. That's not how AI is trained. That's not how it works. Now, in theory, could that happen? Yes. Yes. In theory, it could, going back to my Twitter example, and it has. And it's gone so bad, so fast. And that is where even a rushed closed training data set is super dangerous. If you're like, we got to just hurry up and get something out there, just grab whatever you can, let's train a new version and push out the new model. That's where, when it was like releasing a new model constantly, it wasn't a good thing, because it was like, okay, are we taking the time to make sure what we're training it on is right and all this other stuff? So in theory, could we get to a point, or could somebody decide that they want to update and train the model in real time based on user input? In theory, they could, in which case this research would very much be relevant. But I think anybody I know who knows what they're doing knows that that is riddled with disaster. Like, that's the dumbest thing you can do with AI. And so, like, even OpenAI, like, they explicitly state, like, we don't do that. There's technical terms for it, but we've learned early on that you don't just allow whatever people say to it to update and enhance the model. It would be terrible. So the AI, just to be clear, the AI itself is not developing a personality crisis. The global shift in opinion of AI is not moving, but you do need to be really careful how you use it. And over time, especially, and going back to my very first thing of, they want this thing hooked into every aspect of your life. Well, it's going to become more familiar with you, and you can build a seemingly objective echo chamber, which is what I mean, come on, this isn't new. We see it all the time. This is like the people who are like, no, I'm objective. And then you look at their Facebook feed and you're like, are you serious right now? Like, do you see what your news feed is filled with? Like, it's learned all the groups you're in. It's learned all the stuff you like. Like, it's literally feeding. No, it's not. No, this is balanced. And you're like, that is not balanced. And that's a risk you can run, a very serious risk you can run with AI. And so you need to be very, very mindful of this, very careful of it. And I think the other thing that this brings attention to, I'm only going to get to 3 updates today. The other thing that this should call attention to, and then I'll be done here, is you need to be really careful how you prompt AI. And I think it was oversold for a while that, everybody needs to become a prompt engineer. You need to go specialize, get a degree in prompt engineering. Prompt engineering is going to be the future of work and all this other stuff. I think it got oversold. But what I think is true about prompt engineering, and at least just understanding, prompt engineering is just knowing how to talk and engage with AI, is you have to be really, really intentional and thoughtful about what you're doing with it, because your prompts matter. You are training and reinforcing, again, not the model, but your instance of it, your environment, you're conditioning it in how you want it to think. So if you don't like objectivity, if you don't like critical thought, it's going to learn, yeah, you don't really want that. So I'm not going to put in that kind of work. If you don't want to hear what you don't want to hear, it's going to learn that. And it's going to learn, yeah, you get really bad responses. You get really feisty. You don't like what I have to say if I don't tell you exactly what you want to hear. It's going to become less willing to tell you the things you want to hear. It will just compound. And your prompts heavily influence that. And people think, no, how's that even possible? And it's like, it picks up on every subtle pattern, every unique word choice you use, every tone. It's picking up on the sentiment of the way you talk about it. It's picking up on your response rate and how quickly you respond, whether you use what it takes or doesn't take. Like, it is watching and figuring all that stuff out and then trying to then create a better experience. Going back to my initial point, a better experience for you, which sounds great on paper until it turns you into a complete sociopath, narcissistic, whatever, who thinks they have all the answers and doesn't even realize you're swimming in a fishbowl that's so small you're bumping into the edges, type of a thing. And so you won't see this coming if you're not careful. And so that last piece is really be mindful in your prompts and how you use it. And be thinking about, am I actually asking it to be objective? Is there a better way that I could be framing this? And then, like I try and do all the time, I recommend it to people all the time. Ask it to go back. Can I guarantee that it's stripping out bias? No, I don't have the research to support that. My own anecdotal experience is, though, when I actually am very intentional about my prompts and asking it, and actually proactively, and here's the thing, you have to proactively know what your own biases are. If you want it to strip out its cognitive dissonance, you have to know what biases you've put into it so you can say, I'm aware that I may be biased towards this. So I want you to reanalyze it, knowing that I want that bias challenged, and I want you to come back and tell me, is that actually affecting the outcome? And how frequently you need to do that is going to depend on what you're using it for. Obviously, yes, big things, you're going to want to really make sure you're doing that. Something simple where you go, like, as an example, I love using OpenAI to help me generate thumbnail ideas, and it helps me create stuff. I actually want the cognitive dissonance. I want it to become more familiar with what I like, the style I like, the kinds of concept art it'll generate that I go, oh, gross. No, I don't want that, because I'm the designer behind it. So of course I want it to be more like me. And I've assessed the risk of, well, now, is this just me wanting to see, cover art concepts that just reinforce what I already think and aren't actually thinking of it? Well, yeah, but I want to like it because it's my thumbnail and I need to feel like it's something I would put out there. So yeah, I want cognitive dissonance in it. Now, will I again pressure test it though? And after I come up with a concept, go, now I want you to critically analyze this. How might this be received by an audience? And what things might I be unintentionally triggering with people that wouldn't bother me? So just as a good example of this, not related to thumbnail designs, I'm consciously aware of the fact I have a level of comfort talking about, thinking about, engaging with people on the topic of death. Freaks the snot out of a lot of people. I'm aware of that. And so there are times where I will go, I know I'm probably a little more familiar. I may be a little more comfortable. Can you make sure that the average person, not me, how would this land with them? And not necessarily change it, but give me that feedback so that I can think critically about, is that shock factor something I actually want incorporated? Or is that actually taking away from what I'm trying to accomplish? And ultimately, at the end of the day, what it boils down to is who's in the driver's seat. And I think that's the thing, is if you have this awareness, if you're very cautious and intentional about what you do, and then you maintain keeping yourself in the driver's seat, you can mitigate a lot of the risks that we just talked about today. If you don't, and you give AI the car keys and you're drunk and you go, oh, whatever, just give me home. And it's like, get you home? Like, which home? Like, whatever, I don't care. Just find me a place that I can go. That's where you're going to find yourself waking up in an alley, wondering what on earth happened, type of a thing.